Hi Otters, and welcome to your next English lesson. Today is Tuesday the 19th of January and our learning objective is to plan my innovation. Please may you pause me here whilst you write your date and LO and press play when you're ready to move on. Okay then, so you should be ready to work now. And just to get your brains working and moving, can you have a think about what sentence types we have learned so far that we can use within our story? So have a think about that. What sentence types have we learnt about so far that we can use within our story? Right, then I'm not going to give you the answers just yet because in a few slides time I will be sharing our toolkit for today, and hopefully you'll see on that list some of the sentences that you just thought of. Really quickly, I would like you to have a practice of your story map. So we've been practicing this a lot recently. Because the more you know the story, the more you know the language and the sentence types we're using, so it'll be much easier to write your own. The video is on the class page under Thursday the 7th of January. Okay, once you know the story really well, it will just help with our writing. So pause me whilst you have a practice, loud and clear for your parents and siblings at home to hear, and press play when you're ready to move on. Okay then, so before we start writing, we need to have a think about our Every Time I Write toolkit. Now, these are the things that you must do every time you write, okay? Whether it's in English, maths topic, whether we're writing stories or instructions or diaries, we'll always include these things. Pause me whilst you think of some answers and press play when you're ready to move on. Okay then, so hopefully you've thought of some of the same things that I thought of. So these are the things that we need to include every time we write. Of course, you need to remember your capital letters. They're non-negotiable. You'll need them at the beginning of a sentence and for a noun, for a proper noun. Then you need to be writing in cursive handwriting. Okay, now some of you may not be joining every single letter depending on which drawings we've learnt in school. But some of you will be more than able to join all of your writing beautifully. I don't mind if you don't join everything, as long as you are trying your hardest. That's the most important thing. Then we will be organising our writing into paragraphs, okay? And we need to remember, we need to indent at the beginning of our paragraph to show that we're starting a new one. We've had lots of practice of this, so hopefully you won't forget that. We're then going to use a range of punctuation. So depending on the sentence, we might have some question marks and exclamation marks. We might have some full stops. We'll be using some inverted commas and some normal commas as well today. So there's a big variety of punctuation. And then, of course, we want some beautiful ideas. Not just those easy words such as happy and sad. We want to use some really good adjectives to show off that vocabulary we've got. If you need to look back through some of your work from the last week or so for some good ideas to magpie from, you're more than welcome to do that. And on the website from last week, there's also the adjective map that we had if you're stuck for some good adjectives to describe your characters. And then finally, we've got some different conjunctions. So there'll be some conjunctions you use all the time, such as and, but then there will also be some conjunctions that we used in our subordinate clause lesson to join our main clause and subordinate clause together. So you're going to use a variety of them today. You normally do that without realizing, but when you write your subordinate clause, you will be deliberately using a subordinate conjunction. Then we are moving on to our specific toolkit for a losing tale. So have a think, what is in our losing tale toolkit? Pause me and then press play when you're ready to move on. So we've got lots of things in our losing tale toolkit that we've been learning about recently, and I'm just going to slide it down one at a time. So first of all, we've got our two pair sentences, and this was one of our first sentence types that we've planned. So when you were on this slide thinking about what sentence types you had, hopefully this was one of your answers. And that was when it was saying how mean and grumpy, selfish and wicked grandma was. That was our two pair sentence. Moving on, we've also used colons to introduce a list. Now, the example of this is we used one of these to describe Grandma. So it says George didn't like Grandma. She had brown rotten teeth and a small puckered mouth. Or a small, yeah, it was small puckered, small wrinkly mouth. And then also to describe when George was getting the ingredients. So he got his pan and he filled it with lots of ingredients, colon. It was, oh, what was it? I'm trying to remember. It was luxurious shampoo, scarlet nail varnish, and what was the other item? I can't remember right now. If you remember, you'll have to pop it in an email because my mind has gone completely blank what it was. And it's going to really annoy me now because I can imagine Poppy making it in when she sent me a picture of her work. But anyway, colons to introduce a list, and don't forget your commas in those sentences, please. As well as that, we've started to use speech, verb, action. So we've included speech with inverted commas, and we've played around with where that reporting clause goes, whether it's the middle, the end, or the beginning, and also adding that extra information with the action. Subordinate conjunctions we've already spoken about, so that's with our main clause and our subordinating clause, and the I saw a wubbob conjunction sheet, which we've also looked at previously. And this is probably one of the most important things for any story writing, and it's called show not tell. It's really important as we move up through the score and as we get older, we engage our readers by showing how the character is feeling instead of telling. So instead of saying that George was angry, you'd say how George clenched his fist and his face turned bright red with steam coming out of his ears, for example. As well as this, you might also want to include some sentences that we've previously looked at when we've been looking at different stories, such as The Cobbler of Crocow. And here we've got fronted adverbials, which you might use without even realising, and there are some in our model text as well. Emotion word, comma, such as panicked, comma, worried, comma, terrified, comma, George set to work. And then also those Ed Lee openers, okay, and we normally have those on display in class, so that's such as cautiously, unexpectedly, nervously. Maybe instead for the ed you might have disappointed or worried, or the ing you might have strolling, comma, George entered the garden, for example. So the top 5 I would expect you all to include because we've practiced these. The bottom 3 are for if you just fancy wowing me or if they just help your story flow. There's some really good sentence types that we've learnt about before. We now have to move on to thinking of some ideas. So to help us with some ideas, I've created this grid here, and it breaks the story down into 4 main things that we need to include. We need to have a think about who our main character could be, what they might lose, how could they create the new lost item, so how do they make it, and what could this new lost item do? If you would like, you could pause me here and you could draw this grid in your book and come up with some ideas of your own. If you keep playing the video, I'm going to go through some examples and you might want to see 1 or 2 examples before having a go on your own. So first of all, I'm going to start with the obvious reasons, or the obvious characters I should say, to go in my story, and that would be either a boy or a girl. I'm going to stick with the child in my story as my main character because we're not moving too far away from our model text, and that's for everybody. Please do not move too far away from our model text. We want to stick really closely to it, almost copying it, hugging it closely, and saving all of your other ideas for your hot write, which you'll do later on next week. So what could they lose? So I've had to think about this before, and I think they might want to lose maybe Big Brother's hair gel. I'm thinking of something that they could physically make because they could put that in a pot then. They could maybe lose Mum's perfume, or perhaps they could lose Grandpa's birthday cake recipe. So that's what I'm thinking of. You might have different ideas and that's fine. how could they create a new lost item? So I'm thinking for brother's hair gel, they're going to have to go into the bathroom and collect their ingredients. For mum's perfume, we're going to go into mum's dressing table. We might have a dressing room or maybe her own ensuite or something. And then for grandpa, I think we're going to have to go into the kitchen for a cooking recipe. Go into the kitchen. And then finally, what could this new lost item do? So for that horrible brother with his hair gel, the new hair gel, maybe it's going to make him a nice brother, I'm thinking. Maybe the brother now plays with him. For mum, who's had her perfume replaced, she might let them watch all of the TV and eat their favourite dinner. And then for grandpa, I'm going to just stick with the original idea from George's Marvellous Concoction, and grandpa is going to be kind. So what you could do now is you could have a think of your own ideas, or you are more than welcome to magpie one of mine. Pause me whilst you have a think of some ideas and press play when you're ready to move on. So hopefully you've chosen one of these ideas. If you've chosen one of your own, please, please, please make sure it's not too different. Save those ideas for your hot task. I want this one to be really similar to George's Marvellous Medicine. So I'm going to have a girl as my main character because instead of George. And I decided to go for Grandpa's birthday cake recipe goes missing, which then links with going into the kitchen and that Grandpa is going to end up kind. We're now going to start boxing up our story, and you're going to need this document open. Now this is on the website, or if you don't have a printer or something at home, feel free, you can just write this in a list. You could do the subheading of opening and build up, problem, resolution, and ending. So it's only 4 boxes long. Pause me here whilst you get ready for that and press play when you're ready to start planning our story. So first things first, I need some speech to introduce the main character. And I'm going to start with, you have to excuse the highlighting, I think I'm going to leave it like that for the most part. So I'm going to start with, I'm going out to watch the football match. Can you guess if this is going to be mum or dad? Full stop. Be good and no mischief. No squabbling. A bit like arguing, because I'm sure there'll be some siblings at home to do that. Called Lucy's dad. Standing by the front door. So already I've introduced my main character, and that's going to be Lucy. So who does the main character need to give the lost item to? And I've said it is Grandpa. So Dad is going to continue, and he's going to say, what Dad continued, don't forget to bake Grandpa his birthday cake. Ooh. Now, because this is speech, I need my exclamation mark and then my closing speech marks after it. What is the lost item? We've already said that the lost item is the recipe book for Grandpa's cake. Now we need to use a colon to introduce a list describing the character he needs to give the lost item to. So I'm going to go for Lucy did not like Grandpa. Can you see how I almost copied it? Very similarly from our model text. I am not changing it that much. So you might want to keep Grandma. You might want to keep George. That is absolutely fine. So my grandpa, he had greasy, matted hair and small, beady eyes. Can you see how this has used my 2-pair sentences? Well, yeah, kind of like a 2-pair sentence. So I've used actually 2A sentences. So we've got greasy, matted hair is 1 2A, and then small, beady eyes. Speaking of a 2-pair sentence, though, I'm actually going to include one to describe Grandpa even further. I'm going to describe him as haggard and vile, comma, mean and strict, comma, he was always telling her what to do, full stop. Now I got these adjectives, haggard, vile, mean and strict, from the adjective word map that was on the website from last week. So if you're struggling to think of adjectives to describe Grandpa, you can have a look back at that. So that is my first box done. I would like you to have a go at your opening and build up now, please. Remember, we're sticking really closely to George's Marvellous Concoction. Pause me whilst you have a go at this box and then press play when you're ready to move on. So you've completed the opening and the build up now, and we're going to be moving on to the problem. Now, what happens to the lost item? I'm going to sort of stick quite close to the model text, and instead of a baby goat messing up the kitchen, I'm going to have the pesky cat. The pesky cat had got in again, exclamation mark. Worse than the mess. Again, I am magpieing this from our model text. Worse than the mess. Grandpa's favourite chocolate cake recipe was missing. It was nowhere. Oh, I want a full stop there. It was nowhere to be seen. And I've magpied that from the text because that's a really nice short sentence to end on, and I don't think that I could think of a better one without your guys' help. How does the main character feel? So Lucy is going to feel panicked. Definitely. She might be worried, stressed, anxious. Your character might be feeling something slightly different to mine. And then it says, how can we describe this using show, not tell? So I don't want to tell my reader that Lucy panicked. I want to show it instead. And I'm thinking back to our lesson with our show, not tell. Maybe you've got that piece of paper in front of you or nearby that you can magpie some ideas and use them now. So I'm going to have that her brow wrinkled and sweat beaded on her forehead. She bit her lip. Forehead, not forehead. She bit her lip. Full stop. What was she going to do? And I've magpied that rhetorical question, what was she going to do, from our from our model text, sorry, because it's such a good rhetorical question, I would like to use it in my story. Whilst you have a go at this box, pause me here and press play when you're ready to move on. Right then, I'm just going to make this a bit bigger because I don't know about you, but I'm certainly struggling to read it a little bit. So let's see if I can do that without messing it all up. Okay, so it's a lot bigger here now, and I'm just going to read through where we've gotten so far in case you couldn't read any of it before. So, I'm going out to watch the football match. Be good and no squabbling, called Lucy's dad standing by the front door. And then to answer this question, our dad continued, don't forget to bake Grandpa his birthday cake. This is not my whole first paragraph. It does not make sense. I could not copy that tomorrow and it would make sense. This is just answering each question. So, what is the lost item? It's the recipe book. And the colon to introduce a list describing the character he needs to give the lost item to. I've got Lucy did not like Grandpa. He had greasy matted hair and small beady eyes. Haggard and vile, mean and strict, he was always telling her what to do. What happens to the lost item? The pesky cat had got in again. Worse than the mess, Grandpa's favourite chocolate cake recipe was missing. It was nowhere to be seen. How does the main character feel? Lucy panicked. How can we describe this using show, not tell? Her brow wrinkled and sweat beaded on her forehead. She bit her lip. What was she going to do? If when you completed the problem box you couldn't see my writing because it was too small, you can pause me on this screen now and have a go at it again. Right then, now we're going to be moving on to the resolution, and I'm going to make this bigger again because I still cannot see that. Make it to 20. Thank you for bearing with me. And now we're on to the resolution. It says, how does the main character create a new lost item? So Lucy's going to make a new chocolate cake. and I just have to think about where she's going to make that. I think she goes into the garden to look for ingredients. Now, I am magpieing this idea from some of your work that you sent in to me, because somebody, I can't remember off the top of my head, I want to say either Amelia or Danny, can't quite remember, went into the garden or the garage or somewhere like that to use some items. Next we want an emotion word, comma. I'm going to go for the emotion that I think Lucy's going to be feeling is worry. So I'm going to go worried, comma, Lucy set to work. You might have panicked, terrified, probably an ED emotion, okay, alarmed maybe, Lucy set to work. And then the final section of this box was the colon to introduce a list. And this is when we introduce her collecting the ingredients. So George collecting things in his big saucepan. Because I'm baking a cake, I'm not going to have a saucepan though. We don't need that for baking a cake. So I'm going to have grabbing the biggest mixing bowl she could carry. Again, this is really close to the model text. She headed to the garden, which I've already said, and began to fill it with the most disgusting items. This is where my colon needs to go, because this is where I could have had a full stop at the end and it would still make sense. I'm going to have wriggly worms, comma, because it's in a list, slime from a slug, and rotten apples from the compost heap. You may want to use your colon list from last week for this box instead. Here is your resolution box. Pause me whilst you have a go at filling this out, and then press play when you're ready to move on to the ending. Okay then guys, we are nearly done. So let's get this ending finished. We need to use some speech thanking the main character for finding the lost item. We're going to use a two-pair sentence, and we're going to have a twist ending. So Grandpa is going to say, instead of thanks Sonny, which is what he says to George, who's a boy, I'm going to have thanks dearie, because he's talking to a girl this time. Thanks dearie, smiled Grandpa sweetly. I'm going to keep sweetly because I think it describes exactly how Grandpa is feeling. Then we have, that's the best cake I've ever eaten. Exclamation mark, closing punctuation. Now, in George's Marvellous Medicine, we did have a two-pair sentence, but I don't really fancy a two-pair sentence. I'm going to change this to a fronted adverbial. I'm going to show off that I remember what we wrote in the Cobbler of Cracow and do this instead. And the fronted adverbial that I'm going to go for is in the blink of an eye, comma, because it's a fronted adverbial, Grandpa was a changed person. Can you see how I magpied that from the model text? I haven't changed the rest of the sentence because I don't need to at the minute. And then my twist ending. The twist is we know that Grandpa's changed, so that's not the twist. The twist will be that Lucy found the recipe. So after a while, comma, because this is another fronted adverbial, Lucy found the recipe book containing Grandpa's favourite cake, full stop. Obviously, comma, she still bakes him her fabulous mixture, exclamation mark. And that is your ending done. If in a moment you pause me here whilst you finish off this box, that's it from me today. Thank you so much for your hard work. I know it was a long lesson, but now that we've put in all of this effort, it means that when we're writing our story over the next couple of days, it will go much smoother and it'll be much easier to write. Have a lovely day. Send me in pictures of your plan so I can maybe magpie some more of your good ideas. And I will be back again tomorrow. Bye.